Greetings to you from us here at UNCTV. I am Emma Jaber and we are coming to you live from the University of Nairobi main campus, where today we'll be hosting the Executive Director of UNAIDS and the Undersecretary General of the United Nations, Winnie. Byanyima. And today she'll be having a public lecture in which she'll be discussing the possibility of ending AIDS and preparing for the next pandemic. Now, this comes against the backdrop of the UNAIDS target to end AIDS by 2030. Now, considering the statistics we had as of 2021, with 1.5 million deaths from AIDS and related diseases and 650,000 new deaths, this is indeed still a far-flung target. However, we are hopeful that with interventions such as what we have today, steps and strides will be made towards achieving this target within the next 7 years. And so as we bring to you this conversation today, I'll be speaking to some of the organizers and stakeholders in the organization of today's session, just to hear what they have in mind and what they hope to achieve with this intervention. Welcome so much. Please introduce yourselves to our viewers.
Yes, I'm Professor Alice Odingo from the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies, and I also chair the Central Gender Mainstreaming Committee. In this particular public lecture, I'm glad to be here because I was one of the organizing team members, and we are looking forward to see a fruitful public lecture today, particularly for those people infected and affected by the pandemic of HIV/AIDS. And I hope that today we may see the new steps we need to take to end this pandemic and also be able to face other pandemics that are likely to come in the near future. Yes.
Thank you very much, Prof. You have mentioned that you speak for gender. What is the gender angle in this AIDS pandemic as a whole?
Yes, I can also say that even AIDS itself has a woman's face, because women live longer compared to men with the virus, and therefore there are more women living with the virus than men. And at the same time, the women suffer more than men because of stigma. When they are sick, when they are diagnosed, they are rejected by their society. So this pandemic actually wears a woman's face, and it is very gender specific for women. Thank you.
Right. What to you is the significance of having the Executive Director of UNAIDS herself come and speak here at the University of Nairobi?
This is a great honor to the University of Nairobi, and we are very happy to have Honorable Winnie Byanyima coming here. It's also good for young people to be able to interact with her. I know many may not reach today, but the fact that she has honored us at the UN level, that's a good plus for our institution, and I think we take this very seriously. Actually, as a gender committee, we have been trying to organize a national conference on gender, family, and socialization. And this conference is to bring in the issue of family, because we realize that family is so important on gender issues. The problem we experience comes from the way we have been socialized. So if we can tackle the family problems, even AIDS can be tackled, because people will know how to live with AIDS, how to embrace each other, how to strengthen one another, and be able to get enough support to resist this pandemic in our society today. So it is my hope that even this particular public lecture will be very informative towards our national conference, and I'm very glad to be here this afternoon.
Wow, thank you. And allow me to ask as well, you have mentioned a conference. Who are we targeting with a family conference?
Pardon, please?
Who is our target for the family conference?
Thank you, thank you. This targets everyone, the youth, the women, and even the men, because a family is made up of all those people together. And if they can all come, present papers, listen to each other, debate this issue of family and how we want to socialize each other, we are going to have a society free of discrimination or gender-based violence, and be more peaceful. And I hope all of us aspire to live in such a society. Yes.
Lovely. Thank you so much for your input. Now, as she has mentioned, AIDS is indeed a global pandemic, still having claimed more than 40 million lives as we speak. And so, as she has mentioned, it is our hope that this kind of forums and conversations will propagate more receptive attitudes towards taking action against this pandemic. And so at this point, allow me to take yet another interview, again to hear from one of the stakeholders of this event, to hear what they have to say is their goal. Please join. Thank you so much for joining us. Kindly introduce yourself to us.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Mirigureti Akinyi from the African Women Studies Center, now from the Department of Sociology, Social Work, and I'm also a researcher at the Women Enterprise Economic Empowerment Fund, HUB. So that is where we are. We are carrying out research on women issues, the child care, the cross-border trade, the women movements, from what it has been, what has worked for them, why they are here, what they have done, and we have borrowed heavily from the time they started the journey on the Constitution, that is the 2010, and we saw that when women come together, they do a lot. But what hinders them is economic empowerment, lack of funds to move around and to share what they have. So as a hub, we are happy that Bill and Melinda Gates has given us some funds for the next 5 years to ensure that we bring women on board. And as we speak now, we have those on incubation and business so that they can carry out business with the knowledge. And we also do partner with others like TechnoServe. We partner with all women who are ready to work and who are ready to push the women agenda. And that is why we are today hosting one of our great leaders with the UNAIDS to talk about HIV and AIDS. And you know, health is something which has really pulled women down for many years. And if you see the statistics released lately, women are really affected by HIV and AIDS. And this is because of the society we live in, and we want to talk about it so that we free women from this burden. And because if you are not healthy, you cannot do business. If you are not healthy, you cannot do all that you can. And if you look at gender roles, they heavily weigh on women. That is reproduction, production, and community work. So we need to empower women, and when you empower a woman, the whole family, the whole village, the whole nation is empowered. So we want to take this agenda seriously and see if we can rid women from all this which weigh them down, and this is health. And you also saw that during Corona virus pandemic, many women were affected in terms of gender-based violence, in terms of loss of jobs. Some of them, like in the Nairobi here, who rely on domestic work, care work, they were unable to visit those homes because now they were rendered jobless. And again, because of the transmission and all that, they were unable to move from their houses to go and do what they were doing for daily upkeep. So they were greatly affected, but this is what we are trying now to pick them from where they have left. All is not lost, and they are doing a great job. So that is the work we are doing, and we are glad to have Winnie here come to talk to us on experiences she has had across the globe, because she's an international figure. And when you hear that other people suffer, you also get encouraged that you are not alone. And therefore, together we are strong, and we want to make it strong enough to have it done. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, and I would say it's quite commendable the job that you guys are doing to be able to solve the situation. And as you have mentioned, Winnie Byanyima is indeed a global figure, and she has been huge on empowerment of women. And so I would ask, she also talks about comprehensive sexual health, sexual and reproductive health education, especially to adolescent girls and young women. What are the strides in that area, in your view?
So far at the center, we've not touched on adolescent health. We are focusing on women entrepreneurs and how well can we strengthen them. But with this kind of collaboration, we also need to talk about sexuality of women because there's this story, I don't know whether you've come across it, why Mrs. X died. This Mrs. X could not access the clinic in time. This Mrs. X had so many things around her until now. She didn't have blood. She had never attended clinic. It was far, and even where she was, clinic was don't attend. You can do it in the village. And so we have very many Mrs. X's in the world. We lose them at childbirth, and it is important that we know our sexuality so that we can avoid such kind of death. Remember, a woman takes 9 months to bring forth life, and therefore the more we nurture, the more we keep them intact, the better for us. Otherwise, if you don't keep them, if you don't take care of their health, then we shall have no world at all, because they are the vessels of life. Thank you.
That's true. And probably finally, you have spoken and you speak on behalf of the private sector with organizations such as WeHab. You've also spoken on behalf of academia because you are a senior academic here at the University of Nairobi. How do you think the Kenyan government can come in to collaborate, as you have mentioned, with you guys to achieve the goals we have?
Thank you. We want the government to ensure that the affirmative action funds, like the Women Entrepreneurship Fund, the AGPO, the Kazi kwa Vijana, Kazi Mtaani, all that which was meant for the youth fund, all that should be enhanced and should be done well so that together with the Hustler Fund, then the fund should be in the hands of very many women, very many youth, so that they inspire the economy. Because if we ignore the youth, if we ignore the women, and they are the majority in terms of the latest demographic statistics, then we'll not go anywhere. So I urge the government to partner with the women closely and the youth so that we can have the country benefit from what we want. And we hope for the best. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much for your time. Indeed, the resounding message that we are getting, both from the organizers and even other forums, is that women are indeed part of the most marginalized groups affected by this AIDS pandemic. Latest statistics from the Ministry of Health show that 2 out of 3 people living with HIV and AIDS in Kenya currently are women. And so there is indeed need for more to be done for the women and adolescent girls living with this disease. And that includes also young people, as I have mentioned, adolescent girls and young women living with this disease because they are most vulnerable. The UNAIDS report shows that in sub-Saharan Africa, women and adolescent girls are 3 times most likely to get infected due to the inequalities that they experience as well as the injustices that they are exposed to. And so as we continue to wait for this forum to begin, we will continue to speak to more women and stakeholders in this effort towards reducing some of these inequalities that we have. Please join us. Thank you so much for joining us. Kindly introduce yourself to our viewers.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Julia Nyokabichege. I'm in the Women Economic Empowerment Hub. I'm a graduate student. I'm taking my PhD currently in Women Leadership and Governance in Africa. And my area of research is Women Leadership and water, sanitation and hygiene. I'm almost completing because I've gone to the field. I've collected data that is helpful to the women economic empowerment in this country and also as a university. Yeah.
All right, that's pretty commendable. Now, in view of all that, what do you think is the significance of forums such as this one that we are having today to the target group which we are addressing today, which is women?
Okay, thank you. Such forums, they are very instrumental to the women because number one, they come together. Number two, they come and share their stories. And if you want to learn about women, you need to talk to the women themselves and you'll be able to get the right information. Number three, you'll be able to network. They'll be able to network with different organizations, different institutions that are going to come, and the guests and the donors that have been funding this program together with the Berida and UNAIDS and University of Nairobi. It's a collaboration that you cannot be able to avoid. So as women, I urge them, whether you are a scholar or you're not a scholar, when such events are happening, you need to come on board. You need to come and be able to learn from other women. And that's why we find that women leadership is a bit tricky and it's a bit challenged in this country because women do not have the capacity, all of them. It does not mean that women don't have the capacity, but at least they need to be given more capacity building so that they can be able to match up our men counterpart. You know, we normally say in our classes when we are teaching and when we are being taught also, we say that a man's degree is like a PhD. When you go for an interview, you are a man and you have a master's, and a woman has a master's. For a woman, you look like you have a diploma or less. So it is very critical for women to capacity build themselves, to be able to get information so that even as you go out there, you know what is expected of you. Especially right now we are talking about women economic empowerment. And I know one of the programs that we are having is value addition. We are doing value addition on milk. We are doing value addition on cabbage. We are trying to do also honey. And there are many other products that can be done value addition. In Murang'a County, we have started arrowroot farming, and we are doing value addition on that. We are doing crepes, we are doing biscuits, and all that. And we are able to give the women the best. We are able to show women they don't have to waste their products, and that is economic empowerment, and that cannot come from the village. It cannot come from the streets. You have to come and learn the skill. You have to have the skill. You cannot talk about value addition if you have no idea even how to go about this, the certification, standardization, the KEBS, the KILDI, the KIPI, trademarking, and all that, so that women stop being briefcase women, and they can be able to match the international standards with the ILO and other markets that women can be able to engage, because we are talking about women economic empowerment. In regard to the topic for the day, can we be able to forget about HIV issues and then we wait for the next pandemic, because it's about to come anyway. We are not whistleblowing, but we have seen COVID came, and COVID is with us, and people are still wearing masks. People are still testing positive for COVID-19, and therefore it shows it's a pandemic, you know, and we don't know the other pandemic that is going to come, you know. But for HIV, we have been doing a lot. There is a lot of research that has gone into it, and therefore, if we can be able to deconstruct that, and then we wait for the next pandemic, I think that will be a very great scholarly intervention. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that input. You have spoken on a wide array of issues, and I would pick up on an interesting one that you have mentioned about leadership among women. The government had put into effect the two-third gender affirmative action. How effective is that, and is it helping us make any strides towards reaching the goals that we've spoken about?
Actually, as a governance student and as a leadership student, and governance expert, I can tell you we are still very far as a country. We haven't been able to achieve the two-third gender rule because when the current government was campaigning, did not, actually they promised the women 50%, but we have seen that is not actually being actualized. But we hope that because the government is not yet settled completely, we hope that they'll be able to get more women and we'll be able to get 50%. And I also want to remind the parliament, I want to remind even the executive and the legislature that there was a directive to be able to dissolve parliament if they don't have the two-third gender rule. So if we were to go by the rule of the law and nobody is above the law, that is the way it's supposed to be, and without witch hunting that is happening all over, then the government, the parliament is not constituted, the ministries are not constituted because they don't have the 50-50, because that is what we've been looking for. And I know in regard to women leadership, women also need to up their game, because it's not about every woman who can actually be a leader. You need to actually prepare yourself. If you're preparing yourself to be a PS, you're preparing yourself to be even a vice chancellor of a university like this one, you need to up your game. You need to prepare yourself. You need to have the skills. You have to have the knowledge, so that by the time you're given that mantle, you can be able to propel it to the next level and even a higher level. Yes. Yeah.
Wow, well said indeed. Probably a parting shot?
My parting shot is that is this the most exciting day in the University of Nairobi, the beginning of the year. We haven't had such an event the beginning of the year. We have had, this is the first one of its kind, and we are talking about HIV, and I'm sure it's a pandemic that affected each and every person in this country, and I know we shall overcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Indeed, the call remains that we shall overcome. This today is a forum by women, for women, to overcome issues facing women. As I had mentioned earlier, statistics currently show that 2 out of every 3 people living with AIDS in Kenya are women. And echoing what Winnie Byanyima says as she speaks about the current UNAIDS report dubbed Dangerous Inequalities, that women are indeed some of the most vulnerable groups that are affected by this pandemic. And so at this point, allow me also to speak to Professor Kobia over this matter. Karibu sana. Thank you so much for joining us. I think first I would ask, from where you sit, ma'am, what is the significance of forums such as today's?
Thank you very much. Today we are having an international speaker regarding ending injustice as one strategy to reduce HIV and AIDS. So today, especially when it's happening in the university, it's a very important day because universities are known to be fountains of knowledge. So I'm thinking at the end of listening to this talk, which is ending injustice in HIV/AIDS as a strategy for preparing for the next pandemic. Therefore, I am imagining that after the speaker, who is the executive director, UNAIDS, and also she's the Undersecretary, United Nations, I think after she has given us the talk on how to end injustice for HIV/AIDS, universities will be able to pick up some research work that they could be able to do in terms of finding to what extent is government either investing in ending injustice. I'm imagining other partners will pick issues regarding what can they do in policy or legal advice to end injustice in HIV/AIDS. I think in ending injustice in HIV/AIDS, I'm reminded the abuse of human rights, especially for people living with HIV/AIDS. Most of them are vulnerable, and for that reason they are stigmatized. Sometimes there's violence, and the violence more to those women with HIV/AIDS tend to be more violated than men with HIV/AIDS. So even as we do research, we should be able to find what interventions are suitable for female gender who have HIV/AIDS, and also intervention for male who have HIV/AIDS. So I'm thinking those injustice, discrimination also, because sometimes they don't get equal opportunity politically, socially, culturally, because of the stigma and discrimination that they face. So I'm imagining this knowledge gaps now will be very suitable for anybody wanting to work in the area of HIV and AIDS reduction. I think this also lecture comes at a very opportune time, where in this country we have been told the infection, especially for the youth, has increased. And more so, infection has increased for girls more than boys. Therefore, it's also a time to reflect why, when the whole world is working towards zero HIV/AIDS related deaths and zero new infection, then we are finding in East Africa or in Kenya, there are more HIV/AIDS reported cases, especially among the youth. So I think this particular lecture is very important for us, especially at the university, and also as the country, as the government, to be able to find gaps, because we believe, and we have read a lot of literature, that in the last 4 decades, the UN has been fighting HIV and AIDS, and there has been meaningful reduction. However, we are seeing a new kind of recurrence, more cases coming up. Therefore, this particular lecture on ending HIV/AIDS and injustice is very, very important. I'm sure we are also going to find how do we build capacity for people living with HIV/AIDS to be able to know their rights, or to know which part of the law they can use to empower themselves when they experience these injustices. So that's why we feel all of us, we are here to listen to the Executive Director, UNAIDS, on this very important topic. Yeah.
Thank you so much for those comments and for joining us. We indeed share in your hopes for the outcomes of this conversation today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Indeed, as she has mentioned, it is important for various stakeholders to collaborate to ensure that this trend is reversed. As she has highlighted, there was, before we saw the coming of the COVID-19 pandemic, declining trends in new infections and deaths around AIDS, caused by AIDS and related illnesses. But afterwards, we have begun to see a rising trend in new infections, especially among women and the youths. And there is indeed a lot that needs to be done in terms of coming up with interventions and strategies to ensure that that is curbed, especially as we continue to look forward to the end of AIDS by 2030. And so at this juncture, allow me to bring to us yet another voice to this conversation. All right, thank you so much for joining us. We have had a bit from Wihab, but it is such an honor to hear from you now. Kindly introduce yourself to our viewers and tell us how Wihab comes in today's conversation.
Okay. You hold it, okay. Yeah, my name is Wajiko Mukabi Kabira. I am Professor Emeritus at the University of Nairobi. I'm also Director of African Women Studies Center, which has housed women's economic empowerment. So African Women Studies Center concentrates on studies related to African women and research on African women. We have a PhD and a master's program, and we also have a research center which studies different aspects of African women. So in terms of WEHUB, the Women's Economic Empowerment Hub, this is a research center which has been doing a lot of work in different areas. I'm sure the other people who have spoken before me have talked about it. Areas that are very critical for women's economic empowerment, particularly when we think about entrepreneurship as a process of, looking for ways of promoting the women's capacity to feed their children, to feed their families, the bigger families, extended families, and themselves, so that they are actually economically empowered to build their businesses, so that they are not always talking about, micro enterprises or even below micro, which is very little, that they can move their business to become small enterprises and macro enterprises. So that's what we're trying to do. We work a lot on affirmative action funds. One, because we believe that affirmative action funds are those funds, particularly those which have been given by government, like Women Enterprise Fund, National Government Affirmative Action Fund, Youth Fund, and other funds, where they are trying to create a level playing ground for women's economic empowerment. It means that their businesses can grow to a level where they become like small enterprises, where they have a huge turnover and where they can employ people between 9 and 49, and their income is much higher. So it is a process of employing these particular women so that we can grow the economy. It is Desmond Tutu who says that if Africa wants to develop, they have to address the issues of women. And because women have the greatest potential to make this the continent a different continent in terms of being able to feed ourselves, being able to build our own economies, and being able to build the future for ourselves and for our children. So that is what we are contributing to as Women's Economic Empowerment Hub. It is a program that is actually not just in University of Nairobi, it is also in Kenyatta University, and it's also in being implemented by other civil society organizations. We work with the ministries, by the way, with the government, with the East African community. Currently, we have a team that is training women on cross-border trade, women working in cross-border trade. Now, training them, ensure that they are able to build their businesses. And we also are starting child care centers, because child care is one of the major issues that takes over women's time, and therefore they spend so much time with the children and the family, and they are not able to build their businesses. And we can tell through the research that we have done that it is a very good strategy. So we intend to negotiate with county governments, for instance, to establish child care centers, particularly in the marketplaces. In some places they are doing already, like in Darakanidi, I think they have a child care center in the market. So where the mothers leave the children, and they're able to do their businesses much more comfortably. So there are many things we can do, and we think in the same way that we have focused on women's political participation and women in leadership, we are now focusing on women in the economy, because without money, even politics is difficult to deal with. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much for those comments. Probably we would ask, you have mentioned so much that WeHub is doing for women. And so I would ask, would you please give us a glimpse of the impact that has been achieved so far in terms of how many women have been reached by this program? How many are we looking at reaching with this intervention?
Yeah, let me say this. We work primarily in the area of policy advocacy. We get research, we negotiate with the policymakers to change policies so that they are appropriate for women. I can give you just a few where, for instance, with the Credit Guarantee Scheme, which is a government sort of affirmative action program, where the government gives security to the women entrepreneurs, but also the youth and persons with a disability. And we are working on it we actually did the research and realized that the women are not accessing it, and we intervened and actually changed the policy to include women persons with disability and so on. And we know from the statistics that the Treasury has actually given that already women are getting the credit, that credit guarantee. We have also been working, like I said, with child care centers, and the center in Busia has shown that women are able to travel to Uganda even during the day because their children are at the child care center. So they are able to travel to Uganda, which means that they have to hire somebody else to be managing, to be selling their grains or whatever they are selling, or fish, at the border. They are able to employ somebody else and then go and look for more products that they can sell, from Uganda and also from Kenya. And in that way, we are increasing employment through child care support, and which releases the women to have, more time to work. And it also shows that the children are becoming better. Their businesses have actually grown, some of them to more than 30% within a period of 1 year. So we are making a lot of progress. The other thing is that we actually look at the gender budgeting process and the gender budgeting process, allocation of resources, particularly in the areas which have the greatest impact on women. For instance, in the Ministry of Water, in the Ministry of Health, in the field of agriculture and food security, and even in housing and education. So every year we are following the different policies to ensure that they allocate more resources. And I can tell you that it has been happening. And within the last, just before the last parliament, the recommendation they had given to Treasury was that the recommendation from University of Nairobi should be budgeted for, because they will definitely have a major impact on women's lives and so on. So we are doing a lot of work. I don't know whether that was started by Kibaki some time back, and that program says that when government contracts are being given, 30% of that contract should be given to women, persons with a disability, and also youth. We are following that one because it has not been doing very well. And currently we are working together with the Treasury to see how that program can be improved. So we are doing many things, yes. We are also establishing incubation centers in 16 counties. Among them, I think there are 4 in Coast, 3 in Western Kenya. We have Turkana, we have Ukambani. I think we have one group in Central, and we are working with the Women Enterprise Fund to incubate businesses so that they can grow and we can replicate the same in other counties. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much for your time and your comments. As I had mentioned earlier, indeed, this is a day of celebrating and hearing from the female population what they are able to do for themselves and for each other in order to curb the challenges that are posed by this pandemic, which is HIV and AIDS, that affects women and other vulnerable groups greatly. As has been mentioned before, that women are among the leading vulnerable groups most affected by this pandemic. Statistics show that in sub-Saharan Africa, women are 3 times more likely to get infected, with the bigger majority being young women and women living in the more marginalized areas. And so organizations such as WeHab and others are coming together to come up with interventions that are able to help the women to empower themselves and solve their issues among themselves, to be able to face this challenge and reduce the level of infection. Now, as we had mentioned earlier, this conversation today is going to be a public lecture by the Executive Director of UNAIDS and the Undersecretary General of the United Nations, Winnie, Byanyima, and she'll be speaking on the possibilities of the pandemic and being able to prepare ourselves or brace ourselves for the next pandemic if it comes. she has spoken about the UNAIDS report that was released last year during the World's AIDS Week, dubbed Dangerous Inequalities, in which they highlighted or brought to the world's attention the various inequalities that are impeding or making difficult this journey towards ending AIDS by 2030. Some of these inequalities affect women and other marginalized groups, including children, who are also among the most affected by the pandemic. Their statistics show that while 3/4 of adults who are living with HIV and AIDS have been able to access treatment, only 50% of children are receiving treatment. And this is indeed an injustice, to say the least, considering that they are most vulnerable and unable to even speak for themselves or for their issues. We have also highlighted in the conversations we've had before now the place of resourcing, and Winnie Byanyima speaks quite a bit about the inequality of resources and poorer countries being more vulnerable to higher levels of HIV infections and recording higher deaths and higher new infections of HIV. The speakers who we have had just now have spoken about funding that we are receiving and is helping this fight and work towards ending AIDS. At this juncture, allow me to speak to yet another participant and shareholder in this conversation today, just to hear more. Thank you so much for joining us. Kindly introduce yourself and the role you are playing in today's activity.
Okay, my name is Beatrice Kamau. I am one of the researchers at the WeHub. I'm also part of the women movement of this country. Yeah. We are excited to host one of our own. She has been in the women movement. She has helped a lot, and we are glad that she's the one who is actually occupying that seat. We definitely know that she's gonna deliver. I think today I'm excited about the topic of the day, which is the injustice of the havoc HIV has caused, especially in Africa. And HIV is a cross-cutting issue. And we in the Hub, in our research, have found out that because we do research, we carry research, and we also work with the women on the ground. And an empowered woman or economically empowered women are able to cope with HIV better than those ones who are vulnerable, who don't have food. Like now, there are people who get in Jamii, the older people or the orphans, and because especially the ones who the parents have died because of HIV, you find that they suffer because first of all, they don't have parents. At the same time, they don't even have resources. And we are trying to empower women economically because we know that to liberate women, then they have to have money in the pocket. And HIV, we are hoping that, I'm glad, I am waiting to hear what they have, how we gonna eradicate it, because I think it has taken too long. And we know that when women are empowered, then we can be able to eradicate HIV. They can be empowered through skills and putting money in their pocket. There is no way you can separate poverty and HIV/AIDS.
Thank you so much for those comments. And I would ask, what are some of the challenges that you as researchers and people trying to empower women to be able, as a way of eradicating HIV and AIDS, what are some of the challenges that you face in the course of this?
Some of the challenges that we face is that even when we try to address all the other problems without addressing issues of health, there is still a problem. And if we empower people, if we empower women economically, because mostly you'll find that when people get sick, they are the ones who are consulted, or they are ones who have to stop working to take care of the sick. If our hospitals can be equipped with drugs and self-testing, which sometimes happen, but it is not all over the country. If our hospitals were equipped with medicine and women were also given knowledge on how to even identify and take care of themselves, then we will be doing a lot.
You bring about a very important subject, and just before now we were speaking about resourcing and how that is helping, and that's what you have commented about. Are you being able to collect or receive resources towards achieving that end?
We haven't received resources, and I'm saying when you resource in the whole, you resource fully. Like now, we know the government is giving medicine, and sometimes giving medicine, free medicine, but this person is hungry. This person cannot feed themselves. This person may have lost their job. These people, these women cannot access funds. If we have funds that is set aside for these women to start businesses so that they can do light things, they will be able to take care of their children and to feel part of the society. But when you have to beg, and even if you have this medicine, you find that we even have some women who commit suicide because they feel they are helpless. They are the ones who are supposed to take care of their family. Now they have gotten sick and all this. But if the society embraced them and they feel that they are part of the society and they are able to do work, normal work, it would be good. But some people, when they get sick, even our labor laws, when you get sick and even the insurance, if you get sick for a long time, then you find that the insurance will not give you cover after getting sick, probably after 1 year. So this alone can actually defranchise you. And therefore, we should have a law that is saying that you cannot be sacked because of getting sick. And I can.
Thank you so much for your comments and your time. All right. Now, thank you very much to the various guests who have been able to address our viewers and raise pertinent issues that we hope will be spoken about in today's session, and hopefully solutions and interventions gotten to be able to end AIDS soon, and possibly better prepare for future pandemics, if any. As we had mentioned or brought to the fore earlier on, resourcing continues to be a major issue, and particularly resourcing for poorer countries. From the report that was shared last year, it is recorded that sub-Saharan countries, which are most affected by this pandemic, end up spending 4 times more than what they spend in health, in debt repayment, and 2 times more than what they spend in education. Some of the speakers who have spoken to us here have shared that the issue of empowering women economically and with the information that they need is central to ensuring that we achieve the goals that we seek to do today. And so as the call continues to resound to equalize in terms of rights, services, resources, and science, we indeed join this course as we look forward to that which will be said by the Executive Director of the UNAIDS.
Good afternoon, everybody. As you can see, our guests are here. So we were waiting for a worthy cause. Thank you very much for coming. As usual, we begin with our national anthem, the East African anthem, and the University of Nairobi anthem. So can we have the national anthem, please? Thank you. Be seated. Once more, thank you very much for coming. We are going to have a very spicy afternoon. And I think it's spicy because the topic is a topic that we all identify with. We are either affected or we know somebody else who is affected. So that makes it a topic that resonates with literally each one of us. And I'm also really glad that we have quite a number of our students in the hall, and we are also streaming. So a number of us, I know, said they will see it in their comfort, wherever they are. So we are here, and we expect more to come, and we also have others joining us streaming. I want to take this opportunity to welcome you just before I bring on board our Vice Chancellor, who will give you an official welcome, and then follow it up with a citation so that you know who our honorable guests are. And then after that, we'll have a bit of responses. And then after that, we'll have a bit of plenary. So we hope that we still will be within time. We know we are running late, but because it's spicy, if we slide a bit, might be still accepted. So at this point, I would want to invite our Vice Chancellor, Professor Kiama Gitai, to give a word of welcome and also read the citation for our guest, whose name I'll not mention, but if you know my name, that's her name. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Winnie Mitura. Good afternoon, everyone. We just want to acknowledge all of you who have come for this lecture by our distinguished visitor this evening, the Executive Director and the UN Under Secretary, UNAIDS, Winnie Byanyima. We are happy that you honored us to come here and give this lecture. We are indeed very, very grateful. I want to acknowledge the former Cabinet Secretary for Gender and Public Service, and now an adjunct professor in this university, Honorable Margaret Kobia. Yeah. Yeah. I want also to acknowledge the chair and the CEO of the National AIDS Council, who are also here with us, and Dr. Ruth Masha, the National Psychiatric Diseases, all members of the university community, and also the president of the student body, Meo Vinthogo, who is here with us. Yeah. Invited guests. It is my humble pleasure to welcome you all to the University of Nairobi. We are actually greatly honored to have you here, the Executive Director, UNAIDS, to speak to us at the University of Nairobi community and our guests this evening. Universities are home to the most prone population of HIV and AIDS. That is our students who are aged between 15 and 24 years. We are currently observing a trend where new HIV infections are rising, and it is our unified duty to fight this pandemic. As a university, we have agreed that we should all go back to the basics. This means that we need to start by going back to educating our young people, or our young ones, about HIV and AIDS. We must make the university a safe place for all, irrespective of gender. Recently, the university launched a gender desk. This is a resource center that will support the university community in matters recovery of sexual and gender-based violence and receive clinical and psychological care. Thankfully, we are privileged as a university to always be ahead of our time. We have made several strides in the fight against new infections of HIV and AIDS through the partnership that we have with UNESCO. The O3+ project supported the university in developing and reviewing the mental health policy, the sexual and reproductive health and rights policy, and reviewed also the HIV policy. I received the draft of these policies from the committee, and now we are processing them through the various university bodies. In the reviewed HIV policy, the University of Nairobi has adopted the UNAIDS 95-95-95 ratio, which means that 95% of our population will get tested, and those who are identified to be positive, 95% of them will get enrolled in ARV program, and that 95% of those who are going ARV program will show viral suppression and no longer spreading HIV. Through the Kavi Institute of Clinical Studies, the university has recorded tremendous progress in research through partnership with the different organizations. The university remains committed to the war on HIV/AIDS, not only in addressing the triple factor of stopping new infections, stopping adolescent pregnancies, and sexual and gender-based violence, but also by working through identified high-impact activities and programs aimed at ending stigma associated with HIV/AIDS, discrimination against HIV-infected or affected individuals, and improving the quality of life of people living with HIV. The incidence of HIV/AIDS and the other infectious diseases is higher in Africa compared to other regions, primarily due to underdevelopment. And therefore, the best remedy for all these diseases are economic growth and development. However, development usually takes time, and unfortunately, diseases like HIV/AIDS are one of the biggest obstacles preventing our societies from developing as they should, especially since it takes its biggest toll among young adults, the age group that normally produces most, and has the main responsibility for bringing up the next generation. The overarching narrative over the last few years have been focused on universal health coverage and creating a fairer and healthier world as challenges of equitable distribution of resources took center stage. The recent COVID-19 pandemic revealed weaknesses in all areas of society, especially with regard to research, innovation, more in sub-Saharan Africa, and also tested our commitment toward ending the HIV/AIDS epidemic. We are still far from finding a cure for HIV/AIDS, a long way from finding a vaccine against it. We therefore must make sure that this area of research is given the highest priority in scientific budgets, especially given the recent emergence of viral infections as we endeavor to stay ahead of the HIV virus. This will only be possible through continued collaborations between governments, non-government organizations, as well as philanthropic organizations, private companies, research institutions, and of course, at the center of it all, the persons living with HIV. The University of Nairobi commits to work with all our partners, especially in the area of research, innovation, and enterprise, as we seek to win this momentous battle against one of the society's greatest challenge, HIV/AIDS. In conclusion, may I thank all the partners and stakeholders who have worked closely with the University of Nairobi HIV/AIDS program to ensure continued mitigation through capacity building and the provision of necessary resources to end inequalities, to end AIDS, to end pandemic. I now want to take time to introduce our speaker this afternoon. That is Winnie Byanyima, UNAIDS Executive Director. Winnie Byanyima is the Executive Director of UNAIDS, a passionate and long-standing champion of social justice and gender equality. She leads the United Nations effort to end the AIDS epidemic by 2030. Before joining the UNAIDS, she served as the Executive Director of Oxfam International, a confederation of 20 society organizations working in more than 90 countries worldwide, empowering people to create a future that is secure, just, and free from poverty. So she was elected for 3 terms and served 11 years in the Parliament of Uganda. So she is a politician also. Yeah. She led Uganda's first parliamentary women's caucus, championing groundbreaking gender equality provisions in the country's 1995 post-conflict constitution. I met her in the office just briefly before we came here. And she engaged me in many things. And but at the end of it, she said I've answered them well. Yeah. Yes, because she is used to debate. Some of us are just we go to the lecture theater, we teach, and we walk away. Yeah. and the students have to take notes, and after that we come with the exam. Yeah. She led the establishment of the African Union Commission Directorate of Gender and Development, and also served as Director of Gender and Development at the United Nations Development Program. She founded the Forum for Women in Democracy, an influential Ugandan non-government organization, and has been deeply involved in building global and African conditions in social justice issues. A global leader on inequality, she has co-chaired the World Economic Forum and served on the World Bank's Advisory Council on Gender and Development, the International Labour Organization's Global Commission on Future of the Work, and the Global Commission on Adaptation. She is a recipient of several awards, including honorary doctorate from the University of the Free State, South Africa, University of Manchester, United Kingdom, and Mount St. Vincent University, Canada. She was awarded the 2018 Human Rights and Solidarity Among Peoples Prize by the Latin American Council of Social Sciences. She holds a Master of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering You see? And she's talking about equality from, I guess, with the machines, to be able to run the way they do, you must ensure there is congruence between one wheel and another, completely. So I think that's where she learned some of these basics. From Cranfield University, an undergraduate degree in aeronautical engineering from the University of Manchester. Ladies and gentlemen, can you kindly now join me in welcoming Mrs. Winnie Byanyima? You can arise as we come. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Kiama, for that warm welcome and introduction. Professor Kabia, Ms. Melvin Togo, President of the Students' Council, faculty members, students, friends, and colleagues. Hamjambo. Habari ya mchana. It's a great honor for me to be here on this campus of the great University of Nairobi. I must tell you, when I first stepped on your campus, I think I was somewhere in my mid-20s, and I came here, I was a rebel. Yes, I was at that time a member of a guerrilla movement in Uganda, my country. And on this campus, there was a big conference happening. That was the Third World Conference on Women, 1985. The women of the world had assembled here in Nairobi, and many of the events were happening on this campus, negotiating a major agreement about women's rights. Now, for me, by that time, I was involved in a struggle to liberate our country from dictatorship. And we were waging a guerrilla war inside Uganda. It was called the Bush War. And I was sent by my superiors to this conference to come in and publicize the atrocities that were happening in the bush and in the country. So we had a cell, a house, a safe house, somewhere in Jamhuri Park, and I would take the bus. There were buses on the road, down Gong Road. Then I would walk up to here. Someone had got me a registration for this conference, and there was a fully-fledged Uganda government delegation at the conference, actually led by the First Lady of Uganda, and they were going around the rooms talking about the peace and democracy in Uganda, and as soon as they would finish, I would come in and distribute pamphlets of people macheted on the head, bleeding, dying, showing the human rights violations in my country. I was very proud to be at this meeting. I learned a lot, and here on your campus, I always remember that, hey, freedom, equality are fought for, because I came here as a guerrilla fighter. So that is my story of my visit here. My second visit was now as a more respected leader, because I was this time invited by my friend and my sister, Professor Wanjiku Kabira, to visit her department, and I see you here. Thank you so much. I visited the Women's Economic Empowerment Hub and saw the amazing work that was happening there in research, in outreach on women's rights and gender equality. So I hold your university with great respect, and it's close to my heart. So let me start. Let us imagine for a moment a world where everyone in every country has access to quality health care paid for by public resources so that it's everyone's right to get the best care. A world where children complete primary and secondary school, again, paid for by public resources because it is their right to have that basic education, all children. A world where everyone has an equal chance to live a long and healthy life, where everyone's human rights are respected, where women, girls, people who are living with HIV and all other groups no longer live in fear of other people. This is a just world many of us are fighting for, and I know many of you students, you believe in it and are also in this fight for a just world. This university is known for a lot of strikes, demonstrations, because students believe in human rights and in equal rights. So that's a just world we want. It's not only the right thing to do, it's the only way we will ever end this pandemic I work on called AIDS, or any future pandemic. We have to remove inequalities that make people vulnerable and drive people away from services. So for me, HIV is not just a disease. I call it an injustice of inequality. With everything that we know from 40 years since this epidemic broke out, all the science that has been gathered, the drugs that have been made, prevention tools to stop infection, no one should be infected today. No one should be getting infected today. And if you're infected, no one who has been infected should be dying of AIDS, because there are treatments. For every type of person living any kind of life, there is a treatment. So HIV is driven by inequalities, ugly inequalities that lead to being infected and also lead to death, because those who are infected, some of them cannot get on treatment. That's why global leaders came together in 2021 and agreed. They made a political declaration. They make them every 5 years, committing to end the inequalities that drive HIV infections and keep people away from services. And I'm proud that it's my team and I who framed the document which they signed, committing to fight the inequalities that drive HIV. Today, 38.4 million people around the world are living with HIV. 75% of them are on treatment. So it's working. But only half of the children with HIV are on treatment. So adults are getting on, but children not so much. And also last year, 2021, 1.5 million people got newly infected. 650,000 people died, 2021. So there's work to do. All these people who died, those who got infected, it didn't have to happen, because we have the tools to prevent and we have the tools to treat, to get people on good lives. If we do the right things, we can have a world without AIDS by 2030, as the government's promised. I'm here to tell you the 4 most important things, or the inequalities that we must end, that will make this vision of a just world without AIDS a reality. What are those 4 things? And when we do them, not only will we end AIDS, but we will be ready to stop the next pandemic from spreading and ravaging the world as COVID did. What are those 4 things? 1, we have to equalize access to health technologies and enable everyone to have the best science at the same time. So equal access to medicines, let me put it simply, health technologies. The second one is to end the inequalities that are in the global financial system. So equalizing access to resources for countries to borrow, to be financed, that is important because you need money to pay for health. 3, equalizing in rights for girls and young women, ending gender inequalities because they drive the vulnerability of women and girls. And 4th, ending the inequalities that other groups suffer through discriminatory attitudes and discriminatory laws. So I'll tackle each one as quickly as I can and then have a discussion. First, equalizing on access to medicines. You are probably young and don't remember, but some of the people here will remember, just like me, the years of the 90s when we were literally not working, going daily to burials. Coffins, making coffins was a big business because many people were dying. But at that time, antiretrovirals had already been discovered in Europe, in America. People there were already taking them and living good lives. But here, our people were dying. Because, why? Because they were unaffordable in our countries. The companies that had innovated, made those antiretrovirals, had the permission of the law to put the price anywhere they wanted and make as much profit as they wanted, and they did. They put the price so high, it was about $12,000, and it took us 12 years of campaigning, people in South Africa, President Mandela, and people around the world, even people from the north, to come together and say this is an injustice. There can't be a life-saving medicine there, and you hold the secret knowledge, and you cannot share it with others so that they make for themselves. So it was not until a company in India then made a generic version of those antiretrovirals, and the price came down in one night from $12,000 a year down to $120 a year. Then we could afford. Then our people started getting ARVs. So, why? Because there are laws at the World Trade Organization that were made there that allow a company to hold its patent, its technological knowledge, and reap from it while people are dying. The system of rewarding scientific innovation for medicines for health is skewed in favor of profit-making than on saving lives. Do not be fooled. Incentivizing innovation doesn't always come through profits. Look at your professors here. You think they are not incentivized to share their knowledge? But they are not reaping profits. They are salaried, they are public servants, and they are sharing their knowledge with you. If they make a groundbreaking innovation, they might get a Nobel Prize that Professor Wangari Maathai got. It came with some money, but it comes with prestige. So reward doesn't always have to be profit from people who are dying. But we have allowed it through the World Trade Organization. Let me tell you how ridiculous it is. Actually, I'm not the one who used that word. A Nobel laureate, renowned economist, Joseph Stiglitz, in the middle of the COVID that was killing us here as companies were making profits in America and Europe, and the economies of the world were closing down, he said they had never seen such an economic absurdity, he called it. beyond the terrible health implications, the whole world was losing trillions in a very slow recovery, as just a handful of companies made billions. The whole world, jobs were lost, people lost housing, people died, but a few handful of people were becoming billionaires by the month. He said, I've never seen such absurdity. But if you really want to know how absurd it is, there is a man, there is a drug for HIV, not really for HIV, for one of the diseases that come with very low immunity. If you don't take ARVs, your immunity drops. One of the diseases that you can get is called toxoplasmosis. This is a parasite. This parasite can enter your brain. You can go into a coma. You die, actually. But there is a treatment for it, and it's an old treatment. It was found and registered in 1953, so it's been around for a long time. But even its patent, the right to sell it, was held and even expired, meaning that the one who founded, innovated it, had already made his profits long ago, and the drug was there for anyone to make. But nobody had started making it because there was no demand. Then, when the demand started picking up, a financial person, really, not even a scientist, bought the patent. And what does he do? He pushes the price. This was just in 2015. He pushes the price from $13.50 per pill and puts it at, guess what, $750 per tablet. $750. That is an increase of 5,000%. So this man was pulled before the House Parliamentary Committee in the United States. He was American. And he was asked by the committee chair, why are you doing this? People are sick. They need this drug. And you raise the price in one night by 5,000%? From $13 to $750? And his answer was simple. He said, why am I doing this? He said, because I can. The law allows me. That's the only reason he gave. The law allows me. I can put it there. It's mine. I put it there. Meanwhile, people die. I was here a few years ago. A very good friend of mine, a taxi driver, his sister died of toxoplasmosis. She died, I saw her die, and it was because the health system here could not afford that drug. The alternatives which are there have got symptoms, have got side effects, and also are not as effective in treating toxoplasmosis. So that is what happens. That particular investor really became the poster boy of pharmaceutical greed, and he didn't care. He didn't care. So we have a system, a global system of rewarding medical innovation or scientific innovation that favors profits and not saving lives. So equally, you don't get investors into the diseases of poor people. Many of the diseases we have here could be treated if science was being rewarded, scientists were being rewarded differently for them, but it's not the case. So I made that point, and I know you know what happened here in the case of COVID. I will not repeat it, but the lesson we learned there as Africans was that never again should we stand in the back of a queue as rich countries buy up a life-saving vaccine and hoard it in their stores, even gets expired as our own doctors are dying on the front lines and nurses trying to treat our people. Never again. We must go for our own capacity in producing, distributing medicines. We cannot afford anymore to sit there and wait to buy from others who will not sell to us even when we have money. So this is an agenda that's a high priority for African leaders. We at UNAIDS are supporting them, encouraging local production. I've been discussing it with your leaders whom I have met. It isn't hard, thank you. It isn't difficult. We have the scientists. I just met a few in Tanzania, young people. They have in their own names already made some test kits for diseases that are common here, like cervical cancer, test kits for hepatitis, but they don't have the factory to produce. But they have the knowledge and they have the science. It's their own science made here in Africa. What we need our governments to do is connect them to investors, manufacturers, so that local production starts to happen. I was happy to find that your government ministers here, they are on it. They are trying to encourage local production of, say, our drugs, the antiretroviral drugs for the disease we are fighting and for other diseases. So local production is key. The African agenda is on this. I'm hopeful and will be fighting on that. That equalizing of access to medicines is key, so that when a pandemic hits, we all get what is going to protect us. We don't die while others live. I want to move on to the next point. By the way, before I go forward, I need to say this. Here in your own country, you're moving towards universal health coverage. That will be your own money, Kenyan money, buying the commodities you need for you to go to the hospital and be treated with your insurance card. But you know what? Today in our continent, 95% of the medical commodities we need, be they malaria tablets, be it condoms, whatever, 95% of all that stuff is imported. It's not made here. So imagine, when your taxpayers' money is paying for your health, why should that money go to pay for jobs in America and Europe? The drugs should be made here so that the money for your health is plowed back and creates jobs for yourselves. That is what should happen. So the local production is so important because soon Kenya is going to be rich enough. It won't even be getting free medicines from abroad. It will be needing to make it here so that it uses that opportunity to create jobs. Let me tell you one example that also will bother you. If you go to America, here in this country, 30% of the treatment and the prevention for HIV is paid for by your taxes, 30%. But 70% is paid for by the American government, by European governments, Japan. They put money together and then drugs are bought in their countries and brought here to distribute. So we are still supported. In Uganda, it's more than 90% externally supported. Here it is 70%. So you're moving forward in paying for yourselves. But we are still dependent. But do you know, if you go, for example, to the American Congress, Capitol Hill, and see who is lobbying hard for those parliamentarians to continue giving aid to Kenya, to Uganda for HIV, who is fighting? It is not these missionaries you see here in our churches who pray with us. No. It isn't even the young Muzungu tourists who come curiously to see our countries. No. It is the pharmaceutical companies. Now they are the ones fighting for us. It is not for us. It's for their profits. They want the government to pass aid so that the drugs are bought from them so that they make their profits. So to me, there's urgency on this, to stop being dependent and to make our own medicines and really be the ones caring for our own lives. The second point, and I'll be quick on the second, third, and fourth, I said the global financial architecture. We need to equalize there because there's so much unfairness there, to the extent that that system we don't even have space there to be in decision making. But yet it's a space where every government, when the economy is in trouble, goes to borrow money. In those spaces, the decision making is not ours. So we get handed what others have decided upon. How is that? Let me give you the story. Today, I will start with the crisis we are in here today in Africa. More than half of our countries here in this region are either in debt distress or they are labeled at high risk of debt distress. Kenya is at high risk. Actually, it's better than many other countries. But some have already reached a point of defaulting on their debt. And why? Well, it's a long story. Debt was accumulating even before this crisis we are in, global crisis. But then came COVID. With COVID, all the economies were shutting down. We were already highly indebted. We needed more money to buy drugs. We needed to strengthen our health systems. But we also had to pay debt. Nobody was saying, pause the debt and first solve your health crisis. Then, the debt itself, we pay interest. The interest started increasing with the war in Ukraine. Interest rates started going up. So the money we pay on the interest became much more on that same debt. At the same time, prices of fuel were going up. So the cost of everything was going up. So the debt itself was mounting. Many things happened. The dollar strengthened against all the other currencies. So paying back in dollars, you were using more shillings because you have to pay back in dollars. So our debt situation worsened and worsened. Meanwhile, the rich countries pumped 17 trillion in their own economies to survive the COVID crisis. Because factories closed, everything closed, but for them, they had reserves. They powered 17 trillion. For us, we were looking even for just a few billions we could not get. Then they sat in the G20. G20 is a group of rich countries with only one African country, South Africa. Said, okay, we will suspend the debt for 2 years. Then you have to start paying back. So they gave a little relief, too little, too late. Still we were suffering here and our people dying and lining up at hospitals. That's the system where you can borrow money. The other places where you can borrow, the World Bank, the IMF. At the IMF, they created new money. They called it special drawing rights. But because in the IMF, our voice is just 5%, it's weighted against the wealth of your country, your economy. The rich countries got more of the new money, which they didn't need, and we got just a tiny bit. I have the figures, won't bore you. Again, our countries said, please, let us share better. Let those who don't have be the ones to take more of the new money. No. They said, okay, we will give you some of our new money, but you will also borrow that one. The new money was for free, but now Africa was getting eroded. So I will not go again long there, but you can see that whether it's in the international development banks, whether it is in the places like the OECD is also a club of rich countries who can make policy on taxation. They made some changes in taxation, established a minimum tax rate, but we can't even enforce it because we don't have the means to control their companies. So everything where decision-making is on financing, whether it's in the OECD, the Club of Rich Countries, we are not there. G20, we have only South Africa. World Bank and IMF, our share is so small, our voice and decision-making is so tiny. We are not able to access resources the way they can. And it's not because we are poor. Accessing resources is about your creditworthiness. Many of our countries have good, strong economies, such as yours. You have been growing even faster than some of those rich countries. But our opportunity in the global financial system is limited. And that leads to us not being able to cope with crisis. So we are calling for a better system for debt restructuring. There has to be a system where you can go quickly, get your loan quickly, solve your problem, because epidemics don't wait. They are running fast. There has to be a system like that, and where we have equal chance. You can't give rich people more and let poor people die. So we are calling for that justice in the global financial system. We can talk more about it. Next, I want to go to the issue of rights, equality of rights. I told you about the vulnerability of women and girls. Here in Kenya, by the time we go to sleep tonight, 26 young girls, young women, will be newly infected. As we are talking now, 26 every day. That's our data. In the age cohort between 10 and 24, here in this country, out of every 5 new infections, 4 are girls. 4 are girls, 1 is a boy. Out in that group of 10 to 24. Why? We know the reasons. They lie in gender inequality. This is driven by sexual violence. This is driven by what we call transactional sex, poverty driving young people into desperate coping strategies that lead to unsafe sex. This is driven by the injustices of poverty and patriarchy. That is why. That's why there's such a high vulnerability of girls and young women. We have to deal with it. Talking about violence, which drives this, for how long are we going to tolerate violence against women and girls? I lived here for some time. I saw in the papers. I would buy that paper, not so much to follow the politics, but to know what's going on in society. Time after time, a girl, a woman, actually women, killed by those who are supposed to love them, killed by their partners. And the story goes on, and you hear it's gone to court and it disappears. For how long will we tolerate femicides? For how long will we tolerate the abuse of women in their homes, the rapes that happen and we look the other way, the children who are sexually abused and there's hush, 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 not spoil the family name. These things happen. This sexual violence is tolerated by us. Let me challenge you, young people, women of Kenya. We should not tolerate this anymore. We shouldn't. First of all, when a girl says no, it is not a yes, it is a no. We have to challenge machismo, toxic masculinities that give a boy or a man a license to force himself on a girl or a woman. A no is a no. We must fight those attitudes. We must also say that if a girl is, when a man beats his wife, it is not because he's jealous, it's because he's an abuser. That's what we should call him. Abuse is not love. No, it's abuse, it's violence. These things of changing attitudes are things we in the women's movement have done for a long time. We know how to do it. But what I'm saying is, it shouldn't be the business of those who are abused to educate the abusers. We must get male champions, we must get young people taking it upon themselves to preach a peaceful, a masculinity that is safe and positive and healthy, to go away from the notion of violence and aggression as being male. So we want men to join such a campaign, but that's not enough. We also, tackling attitudes is important, but we must also use the law and the justice system. We must punish and end impunity. For this, I really think that my recommendation to every country I meet women's rights advocates and their friends, I say, women lawyers, set yourselves up to offer pro bono services for every one woman or girl who is abused. Go to court on their behalf. Pursue the case until someone is arrested, until someone is detained. And that way, the lesson will go down that it's intolerable to abuse. We need women to stand up, come together, and be volunteers in seeking justice to end impunity. Then we must support the survivors. The survivors must have somewhere to go. Punishing the perpetrator doesn't finish her problem. So support to survivors. Again, I call on even student body like this. Have a safe space for those girls who go on a date and get abused, to have a safe space to go to get support and help to recover, because some of this injury is lifelong. Then support women's leadership. Some of these problems won't be solved until women have power. It's important. I am so proud that you have a woman heading your judiciary, Martha Koome. I'm really proud of that. But we need more women judges, women parliamentarians, women in the executive, because this issue touches their lives. They will deal with it if they have power. And the power of women, I think you Kenyan women have fought so hard, but it's coming slowly. We need men to give up power and share power and equalize power. I said it to your deputy president. I asked him, I said, I saw in your manifesto, you said you're going to equalize and apply the 2/3 gender rule. How far are you, Mr. President? And he told me they have a plan. But you students, you have to keep reminding them that it's in your manifesto, get it done. Get it done. You need to do that. Yes, politicians deliver when there's a demand. So make the demand because they've made the promise. But that is so that these issues that are in society, that need attitude change, that need law reform, that need resources, can be done. It's not power for power's sake. Okay, I leave that issue of equalizing women's rights, girls' rights. One of the solutions is to keep girls in school. We are arguing, and those are the questions I was asking your eminent Vice Chancellor. I was asking about equal opportunity in the university. I'm interested in equal opportunity in the schools for girls who come from poor families, because those who are rich can pay their way. So I was trying to understand, does the government equalize for girls who are coming from low-income families? So these questions are important. Young people, take them up. A society that is not equal is a society where pandemics, ill health will always remain. So go for equality, ask about equality of opportunity in education as well. We have the data. When a girl stays up to the end of secondary school, half the risk can be reduced of getting HIV infection, plus other benefits. So I leave that point and go to the last point, which I said is delivering equal rights for all people. So it's not just women and girls who suffer inequality in society that leads to vulnerability, to ill health. It is also other groups of people. Let me give you some data. I'm going to say something that some of you don't like to talk about, but I do. Gay men. Gay men, their risk of getting HIV is 28 times the risk of other men. Then you have those who are called transgender women. You know, they are transgender. Their risk is 14 times higher than that of other women. Then you have people who use drugs. People look at them as criminals, but most of them are ill people. They are suffering mental health. Drugs is a way to reduce their stress, and they go into drugs and get addicted. Those are at risk 30 times more than ordinary people, the general population, 35 times more at risk of HIV. Then you have female sex workers. Their risk is 30 times more than that of other women. So what do all these people have in common? What they have in common is that they are discriminated. We make judgments about them. We stigmatize them. So they can't come forward and get what other people get. So you find the incidence of HIV is higher among them because of discrimination in laws, but also in attitudes, stigma. You know, being gay is still illegal in 67 countries. Most of our countries here are still having criminal laws against same-sex relations. In my country, Uganda, we have such a law. In your country, Kenya, you have such a law. More than 115 countries criminalize personal drug use. These laws drive people underground. It makes them afraid to access life-saving services, or even to carry a condom. They are afraid. In fact, in Uganda, some young men were arrested during COVID, and I went to find out why they were arrested. And when I looked at the paper that the police had, they were saying that they were found with condoms. Hello? Even other people use condoms. So that's how vulnerable they are. That's how vulnerable they are. So, but when such laws are removed, we have the evidence. The risk comes down significantly. They become, just like all of us, they can prevent themselves from getting ill. I met 2 women in Dar es Salaam last week. Wonderful, amazing heroes. They were dressed in a hospital uniform. It was in a hospital. They are called mother mentors. These women are HIV positive, but they've volunteered to work at a hospital. Their job is to see all these teenage girls who get pregnant and come in for checkups, or who are still hiding there and fearing, to bring them to the clinic, to be tested, the pregnancy tested, and then if they are positive, put on treatment to save their child from getting HIV. Because you can stop transmission if you treat the mother early. They are doing that, going around hunting for moms or pregnant women, mostly young women, who need to save their lives and save their child's life. For all that heroism, I asked them, can I take a picture with you? I'd like to tweet it. They said, no, sorry. We can't. We don't want anyone to know. Can you imagine? They don't want anyone to know that they are saving lives, because then people will know that they're HIV positive. That is how deep the stigma is against people living with HIV. They are judged. People treat them like they are sinners or they committed a crime. This stigma kills. My friends, stigma killed my brother. My brother was found HIV positive when he was visiting me in Paris. I was a diplomat. I was able to get him on treatment in Paris, and he lived with me there for 5 years, because here the drugs had not come. That's when Africa was still without drugs, and drugs were in Europe. Now, when I came back to Uganda, I came back with him. Now, there was a pilot project of WHO. I was able to get him on the pilot project to continue on treatment. But my brother started to fall out of treatment once we were in Uganda. Why? Because when he went to the clinic, he found there his friend. When he went again, he found there a cousin. And he was a person who was shy and who didn't want to be discriminated. So he started not going, he got ill and ill and ill, and he died. So I always say that he didn't die of HIV. He was killed by stigma. If the society was not judging him, like he was in France, he would have stayed on treatment. He was healthy in France. But here, in Uganda, he died because of stigma. Stigma kills. So if we can end the stigma, the discrimination of groups of people whom we judge, if we can take away the laws that make them unequal, then they can get treatment and also be healthy, and we can move towards ending AIDS. That is my story. So all these things are possible. This criminal law against same-sex relations, what does a government want with people under their blankets? Really? What is the business of government there? This is the business of churches and mosques to preach. But even the other day, the Pope said that criminal laws against same-sex relations are a sin and an injustice. He has changed his mind. So if the Pope can change his mind, what about we ordinary folk? Why should we be judging? So to me, these laws, if removed, we will be a better society. And that doesn't mean you approve. It just means you're letting people be. You're not minding their business. Today, countries are repealing these laws. Botswana, Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda, Angola, Bhutan, Singapore, all over the world we are seeing these laws being repealed. I suggested it to your government. I didn't get a positive answer, but I'll keep asking. I will keep asking. So I want to conclude, my friends, and say you have a part to play. You have a part to play to equalize your society. Equalizing will give everybody a chance for good health, but also a chance to have an education, a chance to have a job. Equalizing is the way to adjust society. And inequalities drive ill health, drive pandemics, drive HIV. Everyone should enjoy their human rights. The global system must reform and give all countries equal access to finance. The laws, the rules that govern incentivizing, rewarding of innovations in science and technology for health must reform so that we have all equal access to the benefits of science. These are what I propose today. So together, we can put lives before profits, we can put rights before prejudice, we can put sharing before greed, and we can put love before hate. Thank you so much.
You will all agree with me that that was humbling. Thank you very much. Thank you. Many times when you hear that there is a public lecture on HIV/AIDS, you just think of how you will get statistics and how you are not behaving right and all those negatives. But the way, the approach the speaker took is so good because she has brought in the political economy of it. She has managed to look at it beyond itself. And again, she is managing to call on us, issue of just world and issue of inequalities. Sometimes when you sit there, you say, well, we can only reduce inequalities. We can't have a society which is not unequal. But I think her speech is very clear, and the last word is urging each one of us to join that call that we can do something. And in particular, the aspect of stigma, critical, very, very critical. And I think a lot that was said is for our management at the university. We are all here as a university, the fact that we cannot produce, there is no production, for example, of drugs, there is a limitation here, we have to wait, we sat back and waited. And sometimes I joke, and it's not a joke. I was locked up in Canada during COVID, and I think the whole world was waiting to come to Africa to support us. But God also was with us, that we got the heat, but the heat wasn't as bad. But I think we can do something, individually, collectively, together, and as a university. And for that matter, I now want to call our own Melvin Audrey, President, University of Nairobi Student Association. Audrey.
Under Secretary General and Executive Director, UNAIDS, Ms. Winnie, Byanyima, the Vice Chancellor, Professor Stephen Kiama, Professor Margaret Kobia, all invited guests, our students, all the dignitaries, good afternoon. Now, my first interaction with HIV at this university was kind of scary. It was a scenario where it was an emergency call where one of our students was trying to terminate a pregnancy locally at the hostels. And when we took this now to the hospital, we even discovered a bigger problem, that she had been HIV infected. And now we had to deal with a whole case that up to this date, I'm not able to describe how it was, because it was a horror to all of us. I was just in my second year back then, and then it occurred to me that what if we are losing so many students and so many other people and young girls to this pandemic without knowledge? Because first of all, the reason when now she started telling her story of how she got involved in all this was because after she was brought to the university, the government paid their part and the parents paid their part. She was not able to afford meals, she could not afford accommodation or any other luxury that the rest of us could afford. And then she resorted to asking for these things from outside. And because of that, she didn't know, she had no knowledge of contraception, she didn't even, in fact, it was even wild to start thinking about HIV infection. And now here she was going to live the rest of her life with that. And of course, the man at the power, it's somebody that you cannot ask. And so what I'm arriving at is the first thing that our female students are facing here are economic challenges. Some of us come from very devastating backgrounds that we cannot afford the simple, you go to the mess and they cannot afford that simple meal that you can afford. And then what we resort to do is very horrifying. It's something that you have to exist with for the rest of your lives. And that is a call to each one of us, from students' associations, the management, the government. What are we doing? What can we do to keep our girls in schools, from primary, high school to university? Sometimes when we send our students back home for the holidays, we feel and think that they're going back home, they're going to be safe. But then it is back home where they're at risk. It is back home where all these things are happening. And by the time they come back to safety, which is the University of Nairobi, we don't even know how to salvage this situation. And one thing we can do as a society and as a community, in future, can we think about ways to keep our girls, those who feel that they might not be safe going back home, either for recess, for the holidays, can we find a way to keep them back here? Just have ways of telling them that you're safe back here, you can stay. But that means that we have to equip the university or these institutions with funds to be able to provide meals and accommodation for these people. So finances, economy, it's at the heart of everything. Because I think as a country, we've been able to come a long way in women leadership, and we can see where we are even in East Africa, because we are leading in women empowerment and women leadership, and we can see where we are. And this is the reason we have to keep on empowering, educating, and keeping our girls safe. The other thing that also is endangering our safety is access to justice. Most of these places that you go to, the people or the law, maybe the law enforcers are men. And once you tell a man that you have been abused by a fellow man, first of all, the look they give you is, they make you feel like they don't believe you. At the same time, they want to make you feel like this is, it's normal, it's happening. So as a victim or as a survivor, by the time you're getting there, you don't even want to talk about it. You either resort to going back, or you decide, you know what, let me just go and sort my problems. And those of us who keep hearing this, we cannot report these cases. We cannot go and confide in these people. We've heard of so many court cases where a man has been charged for a sexual offense, and instead of them given the sentencing that is prescribed in the Constitution, it is lessened, or they're told that let's go and maybe sort this back at home, or let's sort this out of court. How do we expect victims, especially the young girls, to come to these people and report that I have been abused? And while you're doing this, you're not even factoring the number of HIV infections that could have happened within this time. But they will not report, because they report, you send them back home with their abusers, or you let the abusers loiter around, and what could happen to them next? They'll keep on being abused. And if they cannot report, we hush these things, then they're being abused. As a university, I think you've heard that we recently launched our gender desk, which is aimed at addressing these issues, where our students feel safe to go and talk to somebody there, where they know that here I can be safe. We have both men and women who can address these issues. And I think it's time we moved, even in the judiciary, to start establishing gender desks, even at the police stations, so that if a woman goes there to say that I have been abused, or I'm going through this, they can feel safe because they know that they will be heard. But if you keep letting the abusers go, if you keep letting these cases loiter around, by the cases I mean the people, then we are going to have people who are being abused and they just keep off. Recently we had a group of women who championed for the judiciary to have a database for the sexual offenders who've been convicted. And I think this is going to also help us, because once we go there and we find that this is a convict and you report a case, we don't even have to go to all these structures of now we have to again decide if this person did this, because we already have a history that this person did this, and we can also convict them that they did this. And I think that's going a long way to even protecting our girls. We also have we have a responsibility to keep on capacity building, and this is from way up, from down coming up, because if you ask today a first year or a third year how they got to learn about HIV, or where they got their knowledge of HIV, it's mostly not from the parents or the guardians. It's things that we come to hear about them when we are older. And now you don't know what to do about it, or you don't even know if you have it, because young people do not prioritize testing every time. So I cannot be walking to a VCT every 3 months and wanting to know what my status is. But if we keep on educating our girls and telling them that this is a menace, it is happening out there, then we also prepare them to, if they're going to practice sex, then they're going to practice safe sex. And even the boys, they're going to protect themselves and know that they need to protect the people that are around them. And this is a responsibility for all of us. And of course, the one thing that is covered in all this is that sexual violence is still a very live injustice that is happening in our societies today. From school, we get, every other graduating year, we get people complaining that a certain lecturer is trying to see me behind the scenes because they want me to do this and they want me to do this. Or just a lecturer wanting you to follow up your marks, which you paid for this education, you've done your part, and you have to keep on following. And what do they want? Why don't they just give you that mark the way they're giving to other people, So I think the moment we take this up, and I want to call upon the men in this room, because as a student leader, one thing I see us facing a lot is the men are not calling out their fellow men. I will come and report to my brother or my male friend and tell them that, there's a male person in this campus who's doing this. And they tell me to avoid the situation. I shouldn't avoid the situation. I want you to face your fellow man to man, and tell them that this is wrong. But when we tell you and you keep quiet, and you're the people who are holding a lot of these big offices, then you're actually endangering us. So we need the men to rise up. As we educate our girls, we also need you men to rise up and help us to combat this. Every other year we lose at least a student, or between 1 to 5 students every year who's infected, because you come to Nairobi, you come to the university, you do not know what to do. And I think the Kenyan households, you're familiar with this, that when your parents or your guardians or your relatives hear that you're going to a university in Nairobi, they start talking to you and telling you that there's a lot happening in Nairobi. What they're not telling you is that in Nairobi you're going to get HIV/AIDS, but they don't want to say it. Yeah? So they need to be blatant, and when you're coming here, you need to be safe, and they need to tell you these measures. They also need to tell you under what circumstances all this can happen. And of course, we need to be very kind, extend grace, and be kind to the people who are already infected, because now we have first years, I think, who were born in 2006 or 2005. And yeah, time has passed. And now, these people, the majority of this population that is infected, they were born of parents who were already HIV infected. So they were not being immoral. They didn't go looking for this. They just found themselves with this. And now they are here, and we are stigmatizing them and telling them, don't interact with this one, don't date this one because they're this and this. What they need is for us to embrace them and accept that there's a time we were visited by this menace, we are trying to combat it, but we accept you because we don't accept you, actually, you're one of us. So you belong here, and we belong with you. And as a country, let's also champion for equal access to healthcare, just as she has said, because we know that this is a problem. And we know that some of the counties in Kenya, it's very difficult or hard for women and girls to access these medical services. And that's why those who are already infected, there's a way that you can prevent your children and from getting infected. But if you're not able to get this medical attention, then it means that you are not able to get. So as a country, we have a responsibility to keep championing. We have a new administration which we need to keep pushing. And when you see the student leaders on the streets championing for things to do with government funding on education, it's not because we enjoy it, just because we are here, we are in touch with what's happening, and we do not want such kind of problems to keep being with us, and we just want equality. With those few remarks, I hope they were actually few. Thank you for coming, and as we continue this discussion, I hope that we all take this back home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melvin. They were very, very relevant and informative, so thank you very much. I know that we are running out of time, but bear with us because we can't have such an honorable lecture without some response. So I'm going to open it up so that I can get about 3 responses, then I'll look back. If they are still happy on the podium, I might take another 3. So anybody with observations, inputs, one hand is up there already. Over here, second. I'm looking for a third one. Okay, third one, yeah. Let's have you. Mike, who has the mic? Oh, it was her, but okay, let Alice go ahead. Let Alice go ahead. You will go after. Alice, just go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Under Secretary of UNAIDS, Ms. Winnie Byanyima, the Vice Chancellor, University of Nairobi, former PS, Margaret Kobia, Professor, and ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that I'm really delighted to be here in this lecture today for what I've heard. And I want to thank so much Ms. Winnie for sharing with us a bit of her life. I can say that I can resonate with those injustices that she has mentioned. But I want to add one point that in my experience working with gender, the issue of family is very key. Because when people discriminate about outside, they violate you outside. When you come back to the family and they support you, it's not the same as getting it from outside. But if we strengthen our family, then we'll be able to stand against these things. Secondly, the families help us of these values of sharing. And we are able to internalize if there are any non-binary gender within a family and they find solace within their family, it will not be a problem for them and there'll be no children in the street. At the same time, the family takes care of HIV patients, particularly the women. They struggle, both men and men, to look after them. So to me, I would want you to add this to your agenda just to strengthen families as we end the injustice of HIV/AIDS. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bring the mic over here, somewhere here, around here. The three are right in front here. Yes.
Good evening. I had several questions, but I'll just consolidate. I'll consolidate it. And Ms. Winnie, thank you for gracing this event. And I have a question on the UN's contribution to CSOs and CBOs and NGOs that are centered around fighting for injustices on AIDS and access to sexual and reproductive health services and rights. So what is the UN going to do or doing to give more space, more space for CSOs to survive? Because you can look at the civil space right now, a lot of CSOs are depending on public, on donor money and donor funding to run their campaigns, or because even when we say that the country is progressing on HIV/AIDS rights, most of the people on the forefront of this are CSOs or advocates of this. So what is UN doing on that? Also, I have a question on what framework do you think is best for universities to uptake? When you go randomly right now on Google and ask for SGBV cases in the university level, especially in this country, there is no database. There is no database on how many women are experiencing SGBV in this university. And us being the top university in the country, meaning we are setting precedents for other universities, it means the other universities are doing far much worse. So what's the framework? What's the best framework for that? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Right here in front and then behind. You are number 3. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Winnie, for being part of this. And everyone, my name is Judy Lumumba. And I want to focus, or I'm much more concerned of caregivers and community health volunteers, because when you focus on informal settlement, I do work much more in informal settlements, that's slums. You find that majority, the one-on-one interaction with people living with HIV is much more with community volunteers, much more than as compared to the health centers. So you find, what I want to urge UNAIDS is to come up with a structure or a strategy whereby they can directly fund the community health volunteers to enable them to also participate, because we much more focus on scholars, academics, and overall setup, but we forget people like us, who maybe, I said, I have passion for people, so I volunteer. No education, nothing, but I just want to impact lives. So if UNAIDS can come up with like a program or an academy or a structure whereby volunteers can apply, be part of it, get funding, come back, because we interact directly with these people. Second thing I want to focus on is where do you place women living with HIV/AIDS, but they are pastoralists, like they are nomads, they move. So for me to get that ARV with me, I have, maybe the dose I have won't sustain me when I move. So can UNAIDS come up with a remote, and it's not a remote, like a moving clinic or an aerial distribution of ARVs? They can use drones, they can use technology in a way where they can be distributing these drugs. And the last thing is health-friendly facilities. You've talked about funding, funding our health
sector.
How do you call it? Our hospitals, let me say it like that. But we're forgetting about health-friendly services. And I'll give an example. I was depressed, I was going all through a lot. When I go to hospital, the first thing the doctor saw me and said was, go and get tested. Yet I was not HIV positive. What I was going through was depression and stress. So we don't have health-friendly facility, especially in informal settlement areas. So if UNAIDS can focus deeply on community knowledge and bring community knowledge together with academic and scholars' knowledge to enable us to end AIDS. Thank you.
Thank you.
The prevalence of HIV among tertiary student men who have sex with men is 8.3%, which is 13 times higher than that of young men in the same age bracket in the general population. And when you look at the STIs, at least 60% had one of the 5 STIs that we tested for. So as you say it, the situation is dire, and more so in the campus, because this is where the young key populations are. The president of the Students Association alluded to the issue of sex work among students. And I wanted to find out, what are your thoughts on what the universities can do to help and avert this situation, especially among the student community? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to know if there is anybody on this row who wants to give a word. Mwanamaka will go, and then over there, and then one right there. Then we'll get a response.
Thank you very much. Let me start by appreciating the Executive Director and the University of Nairobi leadership, the Vice Chancellor, and everybody who has come today to make this seminar or this conversation to happen. My name is Mwanamaka Amani Mabruki. I'm a former principal secretary. Currently, I'm a student of economics, pursuing my PhD in economics. And I'm happy to see my CS is here, Professor Kobia. So I just picked 2 things which have made me raise my hand. One, the Executive Director's statement, stigma kills. If I told myself, if I'm leaving this room with nothing else, that one I will not forget. Stigma kills. And stigma for a young person, stigma for a student kills like double. It is terrible. It is so bad. And when Melvin was talking, and I was very impressed, Melvin, I said, there is one of our CSs in the making. Very good speech, well done. She said, they fear, they are scared, they are young. Can you imagine yourself at 20 years old, up to 25? You'll be terrified with that diagnosis. And then you have nobody to hold your hand. You don't know even whether, okay, there are those probably who are born with it, but even if you got it today, so what? You know, we have to live. But how do we hold the hand of this young person? I learned something this afternoon, and my neighbor here reminded, it's called Mother Mentor. I didn't know about it, just learned about it. Why don't we have sister mentors here? It's something we can do. We have to help them. They are already burdened with so many challenges. So if they can find a sister, I'm told there's a gender desk. Can we put a sister there so that they know they have a safe space, there is an ear, somebody to talk to? It's very important. The second thing, awareness and sensitization. It has to be done. This is a journey of, I'm told, over 40 years. Is it 45, you said? And we are still scared of what? After 40 years, and we still cannot hold a sensitization forum and tell them it is well. We have you. They say, we got you. Is it? We got you? Yeah, let's get them. Let's get them. What does it take? If it's the sensitization, if it's the awareness, can we do it periodically? Can we have like a planned program with their language? Let them talk to each other. We find experts. We have to get them. I thank you all.
Thank you. It's your turn. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Madam Winnie. Thank you so much for your insightful speech. The VC of the University of Nairobi, former CS Gender, all protocol observed. I've just listened to the findings and your lecture, and it's very scary to imagine we're in this pandemic and we want to get out of it and all that. And before I go on, my name is Julia Chege. I'm a PhD student at the University of Nairobi, African Women Studies Center, and my area of research is women leadership and WASH, water, sanitation, and hygiene. And I interrogate why should we have the women toilets very far and closed all the time when the men toilets are always open. Nevertheless, thank you. Yeah, they're never enough. Okay. I think my thought is we can maybe partner from the Women Economic Empowerment Hub, where I know there are discussions ongoing, and you can strengthen the women who are working there by supporting them, because they do a lot of mentorship, including mentoring us on how to do research. And therefore, we can extend, because they have the capacity within the country to be able to mentor our young people in the universities. And we pass that message in a better way. Just like the way we are passing the message in terms of farming, we want to make farming fun to the young people, and therefore this information needs to be passed to the young people with a lot of fun. Because when you heard Madam President, what she has expressed, I've been in the leadership of this university. Those days I was younger. Now I'm a politician. I vied for Member of Parliament, Kangema, and it was not easy.
Thank you.
But I can tell you, even the women leaders, I have information. Some who went to parliament when they were not HIV positive, but they came out of that place when they are HIV positive. So it's about mentorship. It's about mentorship. And even in the universities, you get any other place of work, and you get in there, and maybe the orientation is not proper. So I think we need a wing for mentorship, and I think the PhD students who are at the African Women Studies Center, we can help you steer that in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is a last person over there. Over there. Then we'll have, the other one. Thank you. The other one. Then we'll let you go after. I'll just give you that because you had held the mic. Mike, so you will go after, then we'll have the response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for giving me this chance to contribute something. I'm Billy Wechuli Juma, student leader, Faculty of Education. My question is, I've seen this talk, it has been female-centered and cultured. So, the male child is being forgotten. We are not being talked about. And we are also affected. So you think that we are strong than these guys. So check on that. Pia sisi msitusahau. Okay, another thing I would like to say that as students in the University of Nairobi, you find that we are ambassadors to our families. So, for example, it is not acceptable to find one of my family member to be affected by gender-based violence. So what I'm really trying to say that these injustices can only end if we as youths, when we go back in our communities, we also make education awareness also to our family members. Let me give you an example. For example, have you ever seen those families that are empowered, well empowered, being affected by such injustices? It's not easy. Therefore, it is our role now when we go back to our families to ensure that all these injustices end there. So, for example, let me say, kwa mfano huko Bungoma unaweza pata mtu affected na kitu kama hii. So unaona msichana amekuwa harassed in any way. Unaona family members wanaenda hapo wanachukua pesa, they take money, and then this girl has been affected. Labda hata amekuwa harassed, amekuwa raped, ama amepewa mimba na mtu mwingine. Na unaona hao wanachukua pesa, wanakula kwa sababu pia wanapata opportunity pale ya kukulia. So if we can empower our families, I think these things is going to end and justice will come back to our girls. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Last but not least, go ahead.
Good afternoon, and greetings even to the Undersecretary and Executive Director, UNAIDS, as well as the eminent panel. So, my name is Dr. Violet Mbiti, and my question is touching on health financing. And I was just wondering, is it possible for UNAIDS to convene a continental meeting, maybe at Addis, where they're going to bring together health ministers so as to address the issue of public-private partnership with pharmaceuticals? Because you can see that when health ministers met during the Abuja protocol, even the Abuja meeting as well as the Maputo protocol, you find that countries have been doing their best to achieve the 15% allocation towards health in their national budget. So I was wondering, is it possible if UNAIDS also convene a similar meeting at the continental level with health ministers, whether they can come up with a policy document, and now the health ministers and governments can also work on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know there are so many questions and observations and comments, and carry them with you, and I hope our guest will also be able to tell us whether in their beautiful website, I haven't checked it well, whether they also have those kind of responses that we can always ask our questions out there and get responses. So at this point now, the floor is yours. About 5 minutes, you can respond to what you can respond to. Then we'll call upon Professor Kobia to close it up with a vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've made some really insightful comments, raised some thought-provoking questions. I won't answer them all, but I agreed with many of your comments, like strengthening families. Yes, of course, but be inclusive. Families are of many types. We have to embrace every kind of family. Female-headed families, child-headed families, grandmother-headed families, and so on. as long as you don't have one definition that excludes others. Civil society space, you said, was shrinking. This is so across the world. We are seeing democracies becoming less and less open, more and more closing, and this is a global trend. It's for citizens to keep pushing back and claiming space. And you Kenyans, I cannot lecture to you. You know how to fight for your space. We learned from you. We learn from you. You're good at that. So keep pushing back against state taking over the space of citizens. The voice of citizens is what makes a government good. Informal settlements, you raise some really important points. Here at UNAIDS, we promote, we support community-led services because our evidence shows that when you empower communities to actually design, shape, and deliver services themselves, that they reach those who need the services. They are the best. So we promote health systems that connect with communities, hand service provision to communities. It's not rocket science to distribute antiretrovirals. It's not even rocket science now to test for HIV. We have self-testing. So yesterday, I went to visit one such center. It's called Hoima. And it is a service that is for, run by, and serves people whom we call LGBTQ, gay men, transgender women, those who, when they go to a mainstream service, are discriminated, are treated like they are not full humans. But in that space, what I saw was really transformational. It's a place where they go, they are accepted, they are treated well, they are given some water to drink, they've got a sofa, a couch to sit on. They keep some of them keep their medicine there because they fear to go with it somewhere else because they are found with the ARVs. People are abusive to them, so they come and take their tablets and leave them there. Amazing service that serves people with dignity. So women-led services, I've seen some even here in Kenya. I've visited some in other countries where women are serving other women with passion because they believe in equality and are trying to advance a cause. They are cause-driven. So I just want to say, supporting communities to serve themselves, supporting volunteers is part of what we do. Pastoralists, difficult question you have raised. Indeed, because pastoral people, you have to give them services that work for them. This is really something that in remote parts of our countries, we must figure out. We still have the same standard service we provide for everybody. We have a blueprint of clinics, centers, but you're right about structuring for pastoral people. Health-friendly facilities, if I can give you one example, I think in South Africa, I was told about dispensers of antiretrovirals that are like ATMs in malls. For young people, that's what works. First of all, young people don't want to feel that they've got this virus, this disease, and to have to show up at a clinic every month or every few months to get a medicine. But they are okay. They will not fall out of treatment if they can pass in the mall and put in their keyword and drops the bottle of tablets and they are gone. It defies stigma, it is quick, it is cool. So services of that kind are what we promote, and there's so much innovation here, especially COVID brought innovations. When people couldn't move, when people were fearing to go to health centers, a lot of thinking around how to deliver services came up, some of it from your country. Some questions I didn't hear well. I am getting quite old too. I don't hear too well. But sex work among students, I really have to tell you my honest thought here, that girls and boys, particularly girls from poor families at tertiary institutions, face very challenging situations. They're far away from home, don't have enough of what they need. They are judged when they engage in relationships that are transactional. I feel that we need to be less judgmental and more solution-oriented for them. I have heard of people who do these savings and credit groups. I think it would be good to establish such groups on a campus like this so that 10, 12 girls can put their money together and lend to each other, and that can help solve some problems. Some kind of work on campus, some of the work here could be done. But then again, you have attitude, you young people, I don't understand you. Me, I was a refugee. I passed through here and I was in America, in UK. But when I was a student, I'd wash plates in restaurants, you know. I'd go at the weekend and sell clothes in a store and stand there and the whole day selling clothes. I would do any job to get some extra money. But I find here in our countries, you all want to feel like you are officers even before you've qualified. Hey, you want to wear a suit and tie and pretend that you are a boss. But be humble, be realistic, do ordinary jobs, go be a petrol pump attendant, go do something. I worked in factories, packing cosmetics. I did any kind of job to get some money. And I think I challenge you too, instead of going for transactional sex, which is risky, go babysit for someone, clean someone's house. You just need some money. You are not yet a boss. You're just a young person, poor young person. I've been one. I can lecture to you on that. And I survived. So some of it is attitude. And I don't agree with the idea of sex work myself. I think that a woman, given options, will not choose to use her body to make money. That's my personal view. Although I respect those women who say they've chosen sex as work. I respect them. It's their choice. But personally, I think that every woman would want a better job than that if it was there. And so I see it more as a survival strategy than as a choice that women make. But there are differences of opinion here. In the feminist world, I respect those who call it work. So for you on the campus, I would strongly discourage any girl here who's here to study engaging in what she calls sex work. I would discourage it. I would encourage her to go be a domestic worker. I would encourage her to go and ask for a job to clean the office of the vice chancellor. I would encourage her to do other work rather than sex work. That's my personal view. I now come to some points I'm not going to go into, but one point I thought was very important is about health financing. You know, yesterday I was talking to some feminists and I said we need to be careful because the social contract is changing. What we in my generation expected the government to give us in return for our good citizenry, working and paying our taxes, obeying the laws of the country, we also expected the state to deliver certain things. It gave us free education. It gave us free health, all right? It gave us equality in the job market, non-discrimination. Those are things that, it gave us security, the police, to protect us and our property. These were things that were standard that we expected. Now, if you get up and you find that now the government is saying, you know, we cannot manage to do the police, we are going to privatize the police, how will you feel? Really, how will you feel that now X owns the company that is supposed to keep us safe? No, no, no. I think that we have to keep our governments honest, because too many ideas come in about what the state should do and what it shouldn't do. And today, the idea is that the government cannot do anything well. Everything must be handed to the private sector. So the private sector will give us health, the private sector will give us education. These are formulas that really lead to wider and wider inequalities between people and ultimately to state capture. Because those few who make a lot of, who take off with the education, with the good health, with the money, what do they do with the money? They buy the political power. They and their children will always be the ones who run our countries. I don't agree. I want a state that is strong and that delivers public services. It might contract someone to bring in something, but it must maintain the role of distributing equally to everybody. That is my belief. So I once researched a hospital in Lesotho. It's not long ago. It was one of those PPPs. A company in South Africa was hired. It was given a big loan from the World Bank, IFC, to build a hospital in Lesotho. This is a big private company in South Africa. The hospital had been there for many, many years. It had become very old, and it was deemed unusable, so it was going to be removed and a new one built. Contracts were signed. They started building the hospital. And there were agreements. The agreements were about you will spend so much, then citizens, when they come in the hospital, will pay money that will go back to the company. Because the company got a loan, it has to repay the loan. So health was going to be sold. People were going to come in and pay a fee for staying in the hospital, being treated. Some will be given free, but there was payment for some. By the second year of the hospital running, the entire cost of the service, are you listening? Because government was putting in this public-private partnership. The government is putting in, the private sector putting in. By the second year, the hospital was swallowing up 52% of the entire health budget of the country. One hospital. Basutu people live in mountains, most of them. They have to come from top of the hills down to get treatment. Now, you have invested half the health budget in one hospital in Maseru. What about the people in the mountains? The woman going to deliver there. If half the budget is in one hospital, where does she give birth? Where does she take her malaria kid? Huh? So you see these all the time. It's a pattern. Public-private partnership, what you get is a model that is charging ordinary people, and the ordinary people who are paying back don't get a full service. But this private runs away with huge profits. So I am skeptical about those formulas. I think this is a way to run away from the responsibility of the state to give people health. Nothing is wrong with public servants. They are smart, they are capable, but you must incentivize them well to deliver a good service. You must manage them well, you must make good teams. These skills don't exist only in private sector. But we are always being told these things so that, and then so many times by those who have the power of the speakerphone, and we start to believe them. The UK system of health is a public health system built after the Second World War. It is so good, it remembered me when I came back to the UK. I was there as a refugee girl. I came back 35 years later to work as a boss. I gave my name thinking I'm registering afresh, pop, my old number when I was a student came up. That's how efficient it is. It's public. All over the world. Thailand, public health system. It is so much better than the American one, who are like 10, 20, 30 times richer than them. Theirs is private. Thai is mostly public. So don't believe the propaganda of some institutions. That's neoliberal propaganda. Don't believe it. I wanted to end by giving you some recent research I got about our health system in this region, but I have some data for Kenya, where the British government, what it gives us as aid, increasingly is not free aid. What used to be grants to our governments to build hospitals and clinics. Instead, now they give to their companies. So they give health companies, they give school companies. So in the health system, the companies, they give money to come and build hospitals, clinics here. So they are using money which they are calling aid to us, but this company comes, builds some hospitals. They are supposed to be low cost, but these same hospitals are now kidnapping patients, holding them for 10 months, even 11 months, because of non-payment. In one case, one hospital here in Nairobi, a woman had twins. One twin died. The other twin was held prisoner in the hospital because the mother hadn't been able to pay the fees for giving birth to those twins. She would come in every day to breastfeed the prisoner baby for several months, looking for the money to pay for giving birth in the hospital. That is aid for you. That is aid through private sector. Another refugee man had an accident. His child died. He got injured. He went in the hospital. He got better. His child was still in the hospital. One child died. The one who was in the hospital, they held him for 11 months, not going to school because the father couldn't raise the money to get him out of hospital after an accident. These are horrible things, but they are happening in the name of, it's more efficient to give money to the private sector to deliver to us. I don't agree. I hope you don't agree too. So question the role of the private sector and the role of the state. Don't take it for granted. You have rights. You are a law-abiding, you are studying, investing in yourself to build your country. What does your country give back to you? What do you need from it? You need health, you need education, you need equal opportunity in the market. So with that, I want to thank you so, so much and say that I've benefited from your insights too, and I hope to be back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, our honorable guest. There was a special last question which we will not have, but can be written somewhere and you can humbly respond to it. At this point, I want to call upon my colleague and our former Cabinet Secretary, Professor Kobia. Karibu.
Thank you very much, Professor Winnie Mutula, sorry. Good evening, everyone. Let me really say I'm very happy to be here to give closing remarks, and I move a vote of thanks, but I have only 3 minutes, and I'll keep to those 3 minutes. First, as you have heard, my name is Professor Kobia. I just want to say thank you very much to the University of Nairobi leadership through Professor Stephen Kiama for giving me an opportunity to connect back to academics after completing my tour of duty in government. And I want to say I won't let you down. I'll join my colleagues, who most of them are here, and we shall see how we answer some of the problem. Regarding the closing remark, Let me start by recognizing our speaker, Dr. Winnie Byanyima, UN's Executive Director and Under-Secretary General of the UN, Professor Stephen Kiama Gitai, the Vice Chancellor at University of Nairobi, the Deputy DVCs present, discussants, participants, faculty, students, ladies and gentlemen. It is really an honor for me to get this opportunity to make the closing remarks and allow me just to tease out 3 takeaways. You may have yours, I may have mine, but I'm just basing it from what our keynote speaker has highlighted. 1, our focus is on the dual goals of 0 HIV/AIDS-related deaths. I think that's why we should keep our eyes, that we have 0 HIV/AIDS-related deaths, and also 0 new HIV/AIDS infection globally. I think that is where our eyes should be. 2, to end HIV/AIDS, we must fight injustices such as stigma, violence, discrimination, etc., that keep the people affected away from healthcare system, such as prevention, care, and treatment. And I think it has come out very clearly that stigma is one of the highest cause of prevention from getting the health services. And I'm sure over the 40 years that we have been struggling with the fighting with HIV/AIDS, there must also be other evolving, new emerging challenges that we are looking at. For example, in Kenya, we are just being told more youth is being infected with HIV/AIDS. That is about 3 months report. And we are wondering, what should we do? Previously in government, I was also responsible for the Ministry of Youth. And many times youth told me, there's nothing about youth without youth. And the engagement with the youth, especially now that we know that more are being infected with this HIV/AIDS, then we need to find out what would be the framework that will work when you want to engage the youth. What is the mode of participation? Because I think as a university, we should find a model. Should the participation be at home? Should the participation be in churches? Should the participation be with a youth group? And I'm sure the president of students here will be able to tease out what kind of participation would give us the maximum impact. Because sometimes we say participation, but we are not very clear what participation we are talking about. My third point is call to action, that all stakeholders to increase investment towards HIV/AIDS, and I'm imagining like universities would be looking at what are the emerging research questions that we should be able to provide answers. For example, to what extent is injustices hindering policy, hindering the fight against HIV? We must be asking ourselves, what legal or policy reforms do we need to put in place that are going to support the fight against HIV and the AIDS? So there are many questions, and especially the whole issue of inequality. In this country, we know, and the whole Horn of Africa, the inequality is becoming bigger than it has ever been, especially with the drought that we're experiencing. So those who find themselves in a drought situation, poverty deepening, and then becoming more vulnerable, I think we also need, it cannot be treated like a one-whole group, but we also need to look at the special circumstances different groups are in who have HIV/AIDS and need some intervention. I'm also reminded by seeing the leader of the widows here that if you are poor and you are a widow, the stigma is even worse. Therefore, in that, that reminds me is you need really to be able to segment with the data. What intervention are you bringing in place, especially after 40 years of fighting with HIV/AIDS, and finding what new intervention would work or what works now in our circumstances. Therefore, you join me in moving the vote of thanks. Allow me to join our speaker, Dr. Winnie Byanyima, who has been our chief guest. We could not have had this event without you. And we really appreciate the way you have presented this through a lot of passion. I've gotten a lot of depth and the importance of the content that you have shared with us. Can we give her a clap? Thank you for coming all the way, and we want to assure you this will also have return on investment by us moving this agenda further. Let me also thank the University of Nairobi leadership for hosting this particular event, starting with Professor Stephen Kiama and the entire organizing committee. And third, I want to thank each and every one of us who has been either a discussant or you raised questions, participants, director of ceremonies, my friend, Professor Mutura, partners who are present, the media. I just want to thank you for taking time to be here with us to listen to this lecture, which is very, very topical and timely in this country. May God bless you. May God keep you. I thank you.
Shall we all arise for the national anthem, Kenya national anthem? Can we have the national anthem, or we just sing? We are all Kenyans. Shall we sing? Thank you. Go in peace.
Now that marks the end of what has been an indeed auspicious conversation and session around the changes that we are able to effect towards achieving the end of AIDS. In the words of the iconic Mother Teresa, I cannot change the world, but I can throw a stone into the water and cause a ripple effect. Indeed, the mood in the room today has been that of various individuals and stakeholders casting the individual stones into this water, that is the pandemic of AIDS, and hoping that they will be able to affect one person or another to be able to play their part in this fight against AIDS in Africa. And so in the spirit of listening to those who have been part of this conversation, allow me to speak to one Doreen, who is an activist, to just gauge the level of impact the attendees feel this has had. Karibu sana, Doreen. Welcome. Please reintroduce yourself to our listeners and let us know which part of this ecosystem you occupy.
My name is Doreen Mora Moracha. I'm a HIV and AIDS advocate as well as a young woman living with HIV since I was born. I live and work here in Nairobi, and I have a digital initiative called I Am a Beautiful Story that aims at normalizing the HIV and AIDS conversation.
How do you feel about the session that we've just had?
It's an important session. It's a session that has highlighted greatly the inequalities that exist, the stigma that exists, and what we need to do. And clearly we have a lot of work on our hands to end AIDS by 2030. So these are conversations that are timely, and we need to keep having them because we only have 7 years. So in the next 7 years, I hope I keep seeing more, because the more we talk about it, the more we remind the world that AIDS is still here and we have work to do by 2030. Being smack at the center of this, who do you feel, in terms of the stakeholders who are able to come into this fight, should put in the most work currently? I feel that all of us have a role to play. AIDS is not just for people living with HIV, it's for everyone. Whether you're HIV negative or you're HIV positive, you have a role to play in the HIV response. If you're negative, prevent and protect yourself. Learn about HIV. If you're HIV positive, take the drugs that we have. It's not a government thing, it's not a UNAIDS thing, it's not a National AIDS Control Council thing, it's for all of us. We have to join hands so that we can end AIDS by 2030, because that is the goal. But we can't do that if we leave it to one stakeholder or another. As a person from an individual level, you are a stakeholder. So take the baton and run with it. Yeah. All right, a parting shot probably to the young people? To young people, I'd love to urge a lot of you to learn about HIV, because there's so much ignorance, and HIV has been in the world for 41 years now. We cannot keep living in ignorance. We cannot keep forgetting that HIV does not exist. I was in a forum recently and somebody said, AIDS is back. So we have to really be intentional in terms of prevention, taking treatment, testing, and uptaking all the new methods we have in terms of HIV prevention, because HIV is preventable. But also let us look at people living with HIV, that they are human. They're not victims, they're not affected in any way, they're not less of human beings, they are humans, and that's it. Thank you very much for that. Thank you so much for joining us. Indeed, that was quite an enlightening and timely conversation. But how do you feel about the feedback you have received from the people who were able to attend?
Very, very thoughtful comments and questions. There was a strong focus on how to equalize services. There was also questions about how to finance health services. And there were also questions about fighting stigma, discrimination, and guaranteeing everyone human rights. Women's rights, girls' rights were a strong theme. But on the whole, I felt young people at the university, I'm encouraged that so many of them came, were listening up to the end, were responding to questions. Their curiosity is strong, and their engagement on questions of health, financing, education, good. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for that comment. We are delighted. Would you also like to comment, sir?
Well, we are happy to have hosted her here at the University of Nairobi. It is really a great occasion for our students, our staff, to listen to her about issues of equality, ensuring that we address them affirmatively, including containing the issue of HIV/AIDS. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time. And so there we have it, as far as this conversation for today is concerned, but the conversation continues on and on in various other forums that people are playing the part that they are able and willing to take. As one of the attendees said earlier today, we are all stakeholders. We may not be infected, but we are all affected by this pandemic. Hence, it is important that we all play our part and do everything we can to ensure that we are able to end this global pandemic by the year 2030.